The year was 2241. Humanity had grown strong. After centuries of fighting each other, the nations of Earth finally united under one banner, the Earth Defense Coalition. For the first time in history, humans stood together, looking toward the stars, not with fear but with courage. When the alien fleets came from the dark edge of the Orion Belt, humanity did not run. They built giant warships, armed colonies, and prepared for war. The skies of Earth were filled with fire as ships launched one after another. Billions watched the night sky, whispering prayers for those going into battle. The first major battle began near Vega Prime, a human colony world surrounded by energy mines and defense stations. Millions of soldiers were stationed there. The alien armada, known only as the Dravery, arrived without warning. Their ships looked like dark blades slicing through space. Admiral Holt, commanding the human fleet from the flagship ECS Valiant, stood on the bridge, her hands shaking slightly. She had seen many battles, but this one felt different. The enemy wasn't talking, wasn't negotiating. It came with one purpose: to erase humanity from the stars. Launch all fighters, Holt ordered. Hundreds of ships moved into formation. The war began with blinding light. Lasers, missiles, and plasma fire lit the void. For hours, the battle raged. Both sides suffered heavy losses. Vega Prime burned below, its oceans glowing red from the reflection of fire in the sky. Then something strange happened. Without warning, 3 entire human fleets, almost 2 million soldiers, vanished. Not destroyed, not defeated, just gone. No explosion, no wreckage. Their ships simply disappeared from every radar, every sensor. Communications went silent. "Admiral, we've lost the Alpha, Delta, and Orion fleets," shouted the communications officer. "What do you mean, lost?" Holt snapped. "They're gone, ma'am. All of them. Their signals just stopped." Silence filled the command deck. The screens that once showed glowing blue markers of Allied ships now showed nothing but empty space. The area where the fleets had been was now filled with strange static interference, like whispers in the dark. Then came a voice. It was faint, broken, human. "Help us. We're still here." Everyone froze. The voice came from deep within the static. It sounded like Captain Aidan Ross, leader of the Orion fleet, but he had vanished minutes ago. "Trace that signal," Holt ordered. Her crew worked frantically, but the voice faded, replaced by a low hum that grew louder and louder until it shook the ship. The lights flickered. Some crew members screamed as their vision blurred for a second. For a moment, they saw shapes outside the window, ghost-like silhouettes of the missing ships drifting through a silver mist. Then everything went dark. When the systems came back online, the mist was gone. The space around Vega Prime was completely empty. The alien fleet had retreated, and humanity stood confused, victorious, but terrified. Admiral Holt recorded her report with a trembling voice. "This is Admiral Holt of the Earth Defense Coalition. The Vega Prime battle is over, but something impossible has happened. 3 fleets vanished without a trace. We are retrieving what remains of our forces and will investigate. If anyone receives this message, do not approach the Vega system." Back on Earth, panic spread across the military command. Scientists analyzed the data, and what they found was even more disturbing. The last energy readings from Vega Prime matched a signal once detected on Earth 5,000 years ago, a frequency no modern human technology could create. Professor Lane, head of the Space-Time Research Division, whispered as he studied the readings, "This isn't alien technology. It's human." Meanwhile, the alien watchers, the ancient ascendants, hidden far beyond human reach, observed from their secret stations. Their crystal eyes reflected the blue light of Earth as they spoke in their silent language. "They have awakened it again," one of them said. "The cycle begins anew," another replied. They had seen it before. They knew what would come next. But humanity did not. Far away, inside the dead zone near Vega, the lost fleets drifted silently through a strange dimension. The soldiers could still see each other, but they could no longer see the real stars. Their communications did not reach home. They shouted into the dark, unaware that no one could hear them. Captain Ross floated inside his ship, staring at the cracked glass window. Outside, he saw shadows moving, humanoid shapes made of light and smoke. One of them looked exactly like him. "Where are we?" he whispered. The shadow turned and smiled. "Home," it said in his own voice. On Earth, Admiral Holt could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard that same whisper again. "Help us, we're still here," but no one could explain how. No one could find them, and somewhere in the deep dark, the first rift began to open. Commander Eric Vance had seen war before, but nothing like this. The reports from Vega Prime did not make sense. 3 full fleets gone. No wreckage, no life signs. Only whispers and static in the void. He was chosen to lead a small recon team into the Vega system to find answers. Their ship, ECS Pathfinder, was silent as it slipped through the black emptiness of space. The crew spoke little. Fear hung in the air like a shadow. Every man and woman aboard knew that hundreds of thousands of soldiers had entered this same space and never returned, entering Vega orbit in 30 seconds, said Lieutenant Carolyn. "Keep all sensors." "Online," Vance replied. "We don't take chances here." As the Pathfinder drifted near the last known coordinates of the vanished fleets, the view outside changed. Space shimmered. Stars stretched into thin lines, bending unnaturally. Then they saw it, a dark crack floating in space, pulsing like a heartbeat. It was not a black hole. It was not natural. It looked like a tear in reality itself. Around it, pieces of metal drifted, ship fragments, weapons, helmets, but they were frozen in time, unmoving. Lieutenant Lin whispered, "Sir, the scanners are reading. Human energy signatures inside the rift." Vance frowned. "That's impossible. There shouldn't be anyone alive in there." Still, the readings were clear. Life signs. Faint but human. Against orders, Vance decided to move closer. The Pathfinder approached the rift slowly. As they did, voices filled the ship's comms.
"Help us."
"It's dark here. We're still fighting." The voices were broken, overlapping, and terrified. One of the crew began to cry quietly. "Sir, we're picking up a transmission," Lynn said. "It's from Captain Ross of the Orion fleet." Vance leaned forward. "Patch it through." The voice of Ross came through the static. "This is Captain Ross. They took us. Not dead. Not alive. We can see you. Don't come closer." Then the ship shook violently. The lights flickered. A sudden wave of energy passed through the Pathfinder. One of the engineers, Private Darren, screamed as his body lifted off the floor and froze mid-air. His eyes turned white. He whispered words no one could understand before collapsing. When the crew rushed to him, Darren was gone, vanished just like the others. Only his uniform was left behind. Vance shouted, "Back us away." Full power, but the engines refused to respond. The rift pulled at them like a magnetic storm. Then for a brief moment, every screen on the ship displayed the same image. Rows of human soldiers standing inside a white fog, motionless, eyes glowing. The ship's systems went dead. The crew could only watch as a dark figure stepped out of the fog on the main screen. It looked human, but its body was outlined in light. "You are not supposed to be here," it said. Vance tried to speak, but the comms exploded in a burst of static. The figure raised a hand and pointed toward the ship. "Go back, before the gate fully opens." Then everything went black. When the Pathfinder's systems restarted, the rift was gone. Only normal stars remained. The crew stared in disbelief. All sensors read nothing unusual. It was as if the rift had never existed. But Darren was gone, and their logs showed hours missing from the time record. Vance immediately sent a message back to Earth Command. "This is Commander Eric Vance. We've made contact with something unnatural. 3 fleets were taken into what appears to be a dimensional rift. It's not alien. Repeat, not alien. The energy signature matches something from Earth's old data archives. Requesting full investigation." On Earth, Admiral Holt listened to the transmission in silence. Scientists gathered around her, their faces pale. Professor Lane, the same scientist who had warned about the old frequencies, compared the data. His voice shook as he spoke. "It's the same signal. The same pattern from 5,000 years ago. We've seen this before, buried deep in old archives. They called it the Gate of Echoes. It was never supposed to be opened again, Holt frowned. What are you saying, Professor? Lane took a deep breath. I'm saying this is human. It's something our ancestors built, and we just woke it up. While the command room fell into chaos, something stirred inside the rift space near Vega Prime. Dozens of blue lights appeared in the fog, moving, circling, merging far away in another part of the galaxy. The Ascendants watched again. Their long eyes reflected the strange human signal. They've opened the first gate, said one of them. Another replied, and soon the others will follow. The forgotten ones will return. Back aboard the Pathfinder, Vance and his team drifted in silence. The stars around them looked normal now, but everyone felt it. The unease, the pressure, the whispers in their heads. Lieutenant Lin turned to Vance. Sir, are we going back to base? Vance looked at the dark space ahead. No, he said. We're going deeper. If we stop now, we'll never know what's waiting for us. His crew exchanged nervous glances. They knew it was madness, but they also knew Vance was right. Something ancient had awakened, and humanity had to face it. The Pathfinder set its course toward the dark zone beyond Vega Prime, where sensors showed more faint distortions in space. As the ship vanished into the black, the whispers grew louder, soft voices saying the same words over and over. Welcome back. To the gate. The Pathfinder floated through the dead zone beyond Vega Prime. The stars looked dim, as if the light itself was afraid to enter. Commander Eric Vance stood at the front window, his jaw tight. 2 days had passed since the strange encounter with the rift, and still no one spoke much. Every time someone tried to sleep, they heard whispers in their dreams, faint voices calling their names. Sir, said Lieutenant Cara Lin, breaking the silence. New signal detected. It's not alien. It's from Earth. Vance turned sharply. From Earth? Out here? Yes, sir. But it's an old frequency, something ancient. The computer identifies it as pre-unification code. The crew looked at each other in confusion. That code was over 200 years old, used before humanity even reached the stars. Play it, Vance ordered. A burst of static filled the room, followed by a voice, deep, slow, and human. You should never have touched the gate again, then silence. The message ended there. No one spoke for a full minute. Finally, Lin whispered, that voice. It sounded human. Vance nodded. Yeah, but how is that possible? He didn't know it yet, but that message was being heard across the galaxy, by Earth Command, by hidden colonies, even by alien monitoring stations. The same transmission repeating every hour, on every known frequency. At Earth Command, Admiral Holt stood with Professor Lane in the control room. The message had been decoded and matched to an old file name, Project Mirror Dawn. Lane spoke quietly, his face pale. Project Mirror Dawn was created long before space travel. It was a military experiment. They wanted to create a way to hide armies, make them invisible to any enemy. But the experiment went wrong. It caused something unnatural, Admiral Holt frowned. Unnatural how? Lane turned toward the holodisplay, showing wave patterns and ancient documents. The project didn't just bend light. It bent space and time. The test site vanished, every soldier, every machine gone. But sometimes, voices came back through static. They said they were trapped somewhere between worlds. Holt stepped closer. So you're telling me Mirror Dawn was a gateway? Lane nodded slowly. A gate. And a prison. Back in the Vega system, the Pathfinder continued its mission. The crew picked up dozens of strange energy pockets across the region. When they sent probes inside, the readings made no sense. Oxygen levels, human DNA, mechanical signals. Inside the next pocket, they saw moving shapes, men in armor, frozen mid-step, surrounded by glowing mist. Their faces were twisted in fear, eyes wide open but unmoving. Private John said softly, Sir, those are the missing soldiers. Vance felt his blood run cold. Pull us back, now. But before the engines could ignite, a pulse of light hit the ship. The air turned heavy and all sound disappeared. For a moment, the crew could hear thousands of overlapping voices whispering the same words. Find the source. Before it finds you, then everything returned to normal. The ship's systems rebooted, alarms screamed, and the crew gasped for breath. Vance sent an urgent report to Earth Command, but as the message transmitted, a second voice merged into his communication feed. It was not his. This is Commander Eric Vance, said the second voice, but twisted, hollow, and distorted. We found the source. It's inside Earth. Vance's eyes widened. What the hell was that? The crew stared at him, terrified. Sir, Lynn said, that wasn't your voice. But the system confirms it came from this ship. Vance didn't answer. He looked out the window again. For a moment, he thought he saw Earth in the distance, a pale blue sphere glowing faintly. Then it vanished. On Earth, panic grew. Reports came from civilian ships across the colonies. People were hearing voices in static, sometimes even seeing images in reflections, ghostly figures in human uniforms, whispering words like, "We're still fighting," and "Don't open the second gate." Professor Lane made a shocking discovery. The energy readings from the rift matched ancient carvings found beneath the Arctic ice decades ago, symbols left by a forgotten civilization. They called themselves the Alarin. These symbols describe a weapon that could erase existence itself, Lane explained. The Alarin sealed it away before their fall, but humanity copied part of that design centuries ago without understanding what it really was. Project Mirror Dawn wasn't human invention. It was stolen Elarin technology, Admiral Holt whispered. Then what happens now? Lane looked up, his eyes filled with dread. If the gate fully opens, we all vanish. Meanwhile, something strange began happening aboard the Pathfinder. Private John, who had been quiet since the last encounter, started acting differently. He spoke less, stared into nothing, and sometimes murmured in his sleep. When Vance entered his quarters, John was standing by the window, whispering. "John," Vance said, "you okay?" John turned slowly. His eyes glowed white. His voice was calm, unnatural. "They're coming home, Commander. The forgotten ones. They never died. They just waited." Then he collapsed. His body shook violently, and his veins lit up with blue light. The ship's alarms screamed again. Medical teams rushed in, but before they could reach him, John disintegrated into ash. The only thing left was his voice echoing through the ship's comms. "Find the source, before it's too late." Vance looked at the pile of ash and clenched his fists. "If this started on Earth," he said, "then that's where I'm going next." Far above the galaxy, the Ascendants watched once more. Their leader, a being of light and shadow, turned to the others. "They are repeating the cycle," it said softly. "Will they survive this time?" Another asked. The leader did not answer. Its gaze shifted toward the blue planet. "They must remember their promise, or all will be lost." The stars flickered. The gate pulsed again, and somewhere between worlds, the vanished soldiers began to move. Darkness filled the skies above Earth's orbit. Every satellite, every defense drone, and every scanner was locked on one point, the strange signal coming from deep space. The Pathfinder had gone silent for 48 hours. No contact, no trace. Commander Eric Vance and his team were lost in the Vega Zone. Inside Earth Command, Admiral Rhea Holt stood before the main holomap, her face pale but calm. Scientists whispered behind her, engineers argued over readings, and soldiers waited for orders. The world was on edge. "Report," Holt said. "Still no word from the Pathfinder, ma'am," replied Lieutenant Grant, "but we're receiving something else." A transmission, not human. The room fell silent. Everyone listened as a voice echoed through the speakers. It was smooth, ancient, and layered, as if 1,000 voices spoke together. "Humans of Earth," the voice said. "We are the Ascendants, the Watchers beyond the stars. You have opened what should never be opened. The gate stirs again." Gasps filled the room. Holt leaned closer to the speaker. "Who are you? Identify yourself." The voice replied, "We are the last guardians of the Alarin legacy. The power you call Mirror Dawn was theirs. They used it to conquer reality itself, and it destroyed them." Professor Lane stepped forward. "You knew the Alarin?" The voice continued, "We watched their fall. We swore to stop any who dared touch their forbidden energy again. But you, humans, have awakened it." A second voice broke through the transmission, calm but filled with pain. "The energy you play with does not belong to you. It belongs to the Forgotten Ones, trapped within the rift since your ancestors broke the oath." Admiral Holt clenched her fists. "Our ancestors? You're saying humanity was involved in this, long before we reached the stars?" "Yes," the voice said. "Your kind once stood beside the Alarin. When they sealed the gate, your species was chosen as its keeper. But time erased the memory, and now the gate feeds again." The transmission ended with a sound like thunder rolling across the void. For a moment, no one could move. Meanwhile, in the Vega system, the Pathfinder came back online. The ship floated among strange, glowing clouds. Time itself felt slow. Commander Vance woke in the medbay, confused and dizzy. The last thing he remembered was the flash of light before the systems shut down. His head throbbed. "Kara," he called weakly. Lieutenant Lin appeared at his side, her uniform burned and torn. "Sir, we're alive, barely. The ship's power came back, but everything feels wrong. Space looks different." Vance forced himself up and stared out the window. The stars outside were no longer familiar. They moved like waves, bending and twisting. Then he saw them, hundreds of glowing figures floating near the ship. They looked human but transparent, like made of blue mist. Their eyes shone white. "What are those?" Vance whispered. A voice echoed through the ship's speakers, soft and distant. "We are the Forgotten Ones. You opened the path we could not cross." The figures drifted closer. Their faces flickered. Human soldiers from the lost fleets, captains, pilots, marines. Men and women who had vanished weeks ago. "There are people," Lin said, her voice shaking. "But how?" One of the figures spoke directly into their minds. "We were taken into the gate. We tried to fight it, but it changed us. Now it wants to come through." Vance shouted, "What is it?" The figure's face twisted. "The source, the heart of the gate. It remembers the promise your kind broke." The room filled with a low rumbling sound, like a heartbeat across space. The lights flickered. On the main screen, words appeared automatically. "The second gate is opening." On Earth, alarms blared in every command station. Rifts began to appear in orbit, black cracks in space itself. Through them, strange energy poured out. Small ships vanished instantly as they got too close. Admiral Holt ordered the fleets to pull back. "No one approaches the rifts. Keep distance and maintain shields." But it was too late. From within one of the rifts, a massive shadow emerged. Not a ship, not a creature. It was a moving storm of light and darkness. Sensors couldn't identify it. The Ascendants appeared again, this time in full holographic form, tall, glowing beings of pure energy. "You cannot fight the gate," one of them said. "You must seal it or everything ends." Holt shouted, "Tell us how." The Ascendant looked at her sadly. "You must find the core hidden on your moon. The Alarin left it for your kind long ago. Inside lies the truth and the key to closing the gate." Then their image faded, leaving behind only static and a final message. "Hurry, the Forgotten Ones are no longer human." Back in Vega, the Pathfinder shook violently. The crew screamed as gravity failed. The ghostly soldiers outside began merging together, their light forming massive shapes. Vance gripped the controls. "We're getting out of here." But the ship refused to move. The mist outside turned red. The shapes twisted into monstrous forms, warped reflections of humans with hollow eyes. "Sir," Lin shouted, "something's coming through the rift." A massive surge of energy hit the ship. Alarms blared. And in the chaos, Vance heard a voice inside his head. "You cannot run from your own creation." The ship was thrown out of the rift zone like a rock from a sling. Everything went black. When Vance woke, the stars were clear again. The Pathfinder was heavily damaged but alive. The crew stared silently at their captain. "What was that?" one asked. Vance looked down at his trembling hands. "That," he said softly, "was humanity's past, coming back to finish what it started." He turned toward the glowing planet in the distance. "Earth. Set course home. We need to find that core." High above, the Ascendants watched the scene unfold. They still have hope, one said quietly. Another replied, hope is what doomed them before. The stars pulsed once. The gate whispered again, and somewhere deep within the moon, an ancient machine awakened, its lights glowing for the first time in 5,000 years. The moon hung silent above Earth, but deep inside its ancient tunnels, something had awakened. Machines that hadn't moved for 5,000 years came to life again. Blue lights pulsed through forgotten halls as a voice whispered in the dark, the gate must be sealed, or all will fall. Admiral Holt stood in the lunar command base, staring at the holographic image of the Pathfinder. Commander Vance and his surviving crew had finally returned from Vega. Their ship was damaged, their faces pale, but they were alive. As Vance entered the briefing room, Holt looked at him sharply. You brought back more than data, Commander. Tell me what you saw. Vance nodded slowly. We saw the vanished soldiers, Admiral. They're alive, but not as we knew them. The gate changed them. They call themselves the Forgotten Ones now. The room went silent. Holt leaned forward. Changed how? They're not human anymore, Vance said. They're energy, light, and memory, and they hate us. They said humanity broke an ancient promise. Professor Lane spoke up, his voice trembling. Then it's true. The old records mentioned a pact between early humans and the Ilaran. We swore to guard something powerful, something called the Source. Vance turned toward the holographic map of the moon. The Ascendants told us the key to sealing the gate is here. If we can find it, maybe we can stop the rifts. Holt nodded. Then that's our mission. Find the Source. Seal the gate, whatever it takes. But it was already too late. In orbit around Mars, the first rift exploded open. A glowing scar tore through space, swallowing entire stations in seconds. Human ships fired everything they had, but nothing stopped it. The energy wave turned metal into dust and flesh into light. From inside the rift came the Forgotten Ones. Thousands of them. Shapes of soldiers, glowing with white fire, carrying weapons made of pure energy. They moved fast, coordinated, intelligent. Earth's fleets tried to fight back, but their weapons barely slowed the enemy. The Forgotten Ones didn't die. They reformed, stronger than before. Vance watched the chaos unfold from the Pathfinder's command deck. We can't fight them like this, he said. They're not attacking to destroy. They're trying to open more rifts. Lieutenant Lin pointed to the sensor feed. Sir, new rifts opening near Jupiter, Titan, and the Belt colonies. Damn it, Vance muttered. They're spreading the war. Admiral Holt's voice came through the comms. Vance, hold your position. We're sending reinforcements. But the signal was drowned out by static. Through the noise, another voice whispered. A voice that was human yet wrong. You cannot stop what began with your own hands. The crew froze. It was the voice of Private John, the man who had died aboard the Pathfinder weeks earlier. John, Lin whispered. The voice continued. The Source remembers. The gate remembers. You cannot seal what you already became. Then the line went dead. Hours later, the largest rift appeared above Earth itself. The skies burned crimson. Every major city went dark as gravity waves ripped through the atmosphere. Humans looked up to see lights forming strange symbols across the sky. The Ascendants appeared again, their forms flickering with stress. The war has begun, one said. The Rift Wars have returned. Admiral Holt stood firm. Then help us fight, the Ascendant leader nodded. We will, but the only way to win is to destroy the rifts completely. That means destroying everything inside them, including your soldiers trapped within. Holt's eyes hardened. If that's the cost of saving humanity, I'll pay it. Together, the human fleets and the Ascendants formed an alliance. Massive battles erupted across the system. Earth's ships fired plasma storms, while Ascendant light cannons cut through the dark clouds of the rift. The Forgotten Ones struck back with impossible strength. They warped time, bent gravity, and turned the battlefield into chaos. Every time a human ship exploded, a new rift appeared where it fell. Commander Vance led a strike team into one of the smaller rifts using the Pathfinder's experimental drive. Inside was a nightmare. Space twisted around itself. Shadows moved in patterns that made no sense. He saw them, human soldiers frozen mid-battle, their faces covered in glowing lines, their eyes white and empty. One of them turned slowly toward him. It was Captain Ross from the vanished Orion fleet. Ross, Vance said. Ross smiled, his face calm. We tried to close the gate, Eric, but it didn't want to close. It used us. It learned from us. What do you mean? The more we fought it, the more it became human. Then Ross vanished into mist. Vance and his team planted explosive charges at the rift's core, hoping to collapse it. As they prepared to leave, the rift itself spoke in millions of voices. You seal one door, we open another. The detonation went off, and the rift imploded. For a brief moment, silence returned to space. But when the Pathfinder escaped, they saw dozens of new rifts forming in other directions. Vance slammed his fist against the console. We're losing faster than we can fight. Back on Earth, Holt received his report. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. Then we find the source now. Every scientist, every ascendant, every soldier to the moon. Professor Lane nodded. If the source was hidden by the Alarin, it must still be protected by their systems. We'll need time to activate it. Then make time, Holt said. We'll hold the line here. Outside, the night sky was no longer black. It glowed red and silver from the burning rifts. Humanity stood on the edge of extinction, but no one retreated. Every soldier, every pilot, every engineer knew this might be the last war, and yet they fought harder than ever. In the depths of the moon, deep under ancient stone, a pulse of light moved through the tunnels. Machines awoke. Symbols glowed on the walls. A hidden voice whispered, "When the last rift burns, the source shall open, and judgment shall begin." In the distance beyond the solar system, the Ascendant's home stars flickered out one by one. Their leader turned toward the glowing shape of Earth. "They fight even when the end is written," it said softly. Another Ascendant replied, "That is why they frighten even the stars." The gate pulsed again, brighter than ever. The Rift Wars had truly begun. The war had turned the stars into fire. Every planet that once shone with human light now burned under the shadow of the rifts. The skies over Earth were no longer blue. They shimmered with red scars that looked alive. Admiral Rhea. Holt stood inside the lunar base command room, watching the data feed from her satellites. One by one, human colonies were falling silent. Every minute another beacon vanished, but she did not blink. She had no time to feel fear anymore. In front of her, Commander Eric Vance and Professor Lane studied a strange glowing cube on the table. It pulsed softly as if breathing. "This is it," Lane said. "The source key. It's waking up," Vance frowned. "Then what are we waiting for?" Lane looked up slowly. "The source won't open unless it recognizes us. It needs proof of the old promise." Holt's voice was low and calm. "Then we find out what that promise was." Far beneath the lunar base, a massive ancient gate stood sealed by energy older than humanity itself. Carvings on its surface showed humans standing beside strange, tall beings, the Alarin handing them something glowing between their palms. A pact, frozen in stone. Professor Lane walked slowly toward it, his fingers brushing the old symbols. "The Alarin made us guardians of the source. They trusted us to protect it, not to use it." Vance crossed his arms. "Then why are we paying the price for their mistake?" Lane turned, his face grim. "Because we broke that promise. We built weapons powered by fragments of the source. The rifts came from that theft." Holt said nothing. She already knew it was true. Humanity had taken energy it didn't understand and turned it into war machines. The forgotten armies that vanished were not victims. They were consequences. A sudden tremor shook the moon. The lights flickered. Sirens screamed. Lieutenant Lin's voice came through the comms. "Admiral!" A new rift forming right above us. Holt slammed her fist against the console. "Get every defense system online. Vance, Lane, keep working. That gate must open." Vance and Lane rushed to the control panel. Outside, through the reinforced windows, a red crack opened in space above the moon. Dozens of shapes emerged, the forgotten ones. Their bodies shimmered like broken glass, and their voices echoed across every frequency. Return what was stolen. Earth's defense ships rose from orbit to intercept, but the Forgotten Ones tore through them with blinding light. Inside the tunnels, Lane screamed over the roar. "I've almost got it." "Just a few more seconds." Vance drew his blaster. "We don't have seconds." The air shook as one of the Forgotten Ones phased through the wall, landing before them. It had the face of a human soldier, half real, half burning light. "Eric Vance," it said, its voice layered with hundreds of echoes. "Do you remember me?" Vance froze. "John." The ghostly figure smiled. "We tried to close the first rift, remember? But we were betrayed by the ones who wanted power. You were one of them." Vance stepped back. "No, I tried to save us." The Forgotten One extended a glowing hand. "Then prove it. Finish what we couldn't." Lane shouted, "Eric! The gate! Touch it now!" Vance turned and placed his hand on the glowing symbols. The gate reacted instantly. Light erupted, sweeping through the entire chamber. The Forgotten One vanished, leaving only his last whisper. "Do not fail us again." The massive gate opened with a deep, rumbling sound. Inside was a huge chamber filled with floating structures and streams of golden energy that curved like rivers. At its center was a heart of light, the source. It pulsed like it was alive, watching them. Lane whispered, "It's beautiful." But Holt's voice came through the comm. "Is it a weapon or a key?" Vance looked at the glowing heart. "Maybe both." Lane approached carefully. "The source remembers everything, the promise, the betrayal, the wars. If we ask it to close the rifts, it might listen. But if it judges us unworthy, it could end us instead." Holt's voice was steady. "Then we take the risk." Lane placed the source key into the central slot. A bright beam of light shot upward, connecting the moon to the burning sky. The rifts across the system trembled. The Forgotten One screamed as if in pain. "It's working!" Vance shouted, but then something went wrong. The source flickered, its light dimming. A deep voice echoed through every channel. "Human, yet not. You cannot seal what is incomplete." Lane gasped. "It needs the other half of the promise." Vance frowned. "The Elarin half." "Yes," Lane said. "The Elarin bound their life force to the source. Without them, it can't stabilize." Admiral Holt spoke through the static. "Then find them. Do whatever it takes." At that moment, the Ascendants appeared inside the chamber, their glowing forms flickering. "We are the Elarin's descendants," their leader said. "The source was ours to guard, but we failed. Humanity took what we left, and now both our races pay the price." Vance stepped forward. "Then help us finish it. Help us keep the promise." The Ascendant leader looked at him for a long moment. "You still fight when hope is gone. That is what makes you dangerous. That is why the source listens to you." It raised its hand and touched the beam of light. Instantly, the source blazed with power. The entire moon shook. Across the system, the rifts began to collapse one by one. The Forgotten Ones screamed as their light was drawn back into the void. Lane smiled through tears. "It's working. We're saving them." But then the source surged too fast. The power levels spiked. The moon itself started to crack. Holt's voice came through the comm. "You have to shut it down, Vance. It's overloading." Vance shook his head. "If we stop now, the rifts reopen. We finish this." He slammed his palm onto the control panel, forcing the power through. The beam expanded, swallowing the moon in white light. Silence. When it cleared, the rifts were gone. But the moon was shattered. Fragments of it floated quietly around Earth like a halo. There was no signal from the lunar base, no trace of Admiral Holt, no sign of the Pathfinder. Humanity looked up from the ruined Earth and saw only light dust drifting across the stars. Professor Lane's final log, found weeks later, said only one thing: the promise is kept, but the price was everything. The moon was gone. Its fragments drifted like silver ghosts across the night sky, forming a ring around Earth. The people below watched in silence, knowing that every piece carried the memory of those who died to save them. For the first time in years, the rifts were gone. The red scars in the sky faded, and the stars returned, cold, distant, beautiful. But the world below was broken. Cities lay in ruins, power was scarce, and half the fleet was gone. yet humanity was alive. Commander Eric Vance opened his eyes inside a wrecked escape pod floating in the darkness. His suit alarms blinked weakly. The last thing he remembered was the explosion, the moon splitting apart, the source erupting in light. He coughed and looked outside the cracked window. The earth shone below him, blue and bright. "Still here," he whispered. "We actually did it." A transmission cut through the static. "This is Earth Command. To any survivors, please respond." Vance pressed the comm. "This is Commander Eric Vance. Lunar mission complete. The source is stable. The rifts are gone." Cheers erupted through the channel. People cried, laughed, shouted his name. But then a quieter voice came through, the voice of Admiral Holt. "Vance," she said softly. He froze. "Admiral, you're alive." Her voice was faint, filled with static. "Barely. The blast pushed my command pod into deep orbit. The others didn't make it. But listen carefully, something's happening." Vance frowned. "What do you mean?" "The source isn't done. It's changing. Far away, beyond Mars, a strange golden light began to expand. It wasn't a rift. It was calm, warm, and steady. The sensors called it a stabilization field. Professor Lane had written about it before he died. If the source judged humanity worthy, it would rebuild what was lost. Vance watched in awe as the field spread slowly through space. Dead satellites reactivated. Broken ships repaired themselves. Even the floating debris of the moon began to shift, forming patterns, almost as if something was guiding them. "Admiral," he said quietly, "I think it's giving something back." Days passed. Rescue ships picked up survivors from every world. The remaining ascendants appeared once more, their glowing forms dim but peaceful. Their leader approached the Earth fleet and spoke through energy waves. "The source has chosen balance. The promise is restored. Humanity will rise again." Vance looked at him. "And what about you?" The ascendant smiled faintly. "Our time ends here. The source remembers both races now. It will carry our memory into yours. Protect it well." With that, the ascendants dissolved into light, joining the golden stream that flowed toward the stars. Back on Earth, Admiral Holt was carried from her capsule, pale but alive. She stood on the cracked surface of a rebuilt command platform and looked at the horizon. The sun was rising, its light catching the fragments of the moon like diamonds in the sky. "We lost everything," she said quietly, "but we kept our soul." Vance stood beside her, his face scarred, his uniform torn. "We kept the promise." "Maybe that's enough," she nodded. "Maybe it is." Then the ground shook. A column of golden light rose from the ocean, reaching the clouds. It spread across the sky in waves, like dawn breaking after endless night. From space, it looked like Earth itself was glowing. The source had merged with the planet, hiding its power within the oceans and core, binding itself to humanity forever. Months later, humanity began to rebuild. The fleets were smaller but stronger. The nations of Earth worked together for the first time in centuries. There was no war, no greed, only purpose. They named the new lunar ring the Guardian Halo. It shimmered at night, a reminder of those who gave their lives. Children grew up pointing at it, listening to stories of the Rift Wars and the heroes who vanished to save them. And every few nights, strange lights flickered along the ring, patterns of Morse code. Impossible for machines to explain. Some said it was solar interference. Others said it was the wind of the stars. But Vance believed he knew the truth. He stood in the observatory one evening, watching the lights. They blinked in a familiar rhythm. 3 short, 1 long, 2 short. It was the signal of the Pathfinder. He smiled. "They're still watching." In the final years of her life, Admiral Holt wrote one last report. "We once unleashed war across the stars. But when the darkness came, we did not beg, we did not hide. We stood together and became something greater. The stars will remember humanity, not for what we destroyed, but for what we defended." Centuries later, explorers from another galaxy found the ruins of the old fleets, the broken ships floating around Earth's ring. When they touched one of the fragments, it glowed softly and played a voice. "We were the children of Earth. We faced the void, and we did not vanish. We endured. The alien explorers looked at each other in silence. One of them whispered, "These humans, they survived the impossible." And for the first time another world bowed in respect. The stars burned brighter that night. The scars of the past were gone. And as the guardian halo circled the blue world below, the message of humanity echoed through eternity. We kept the promise.